Okay. So, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. Welcome to join this MICCAI tutorial on research funding pursuit. What you haven't know yet. Through this tutorial, you will learn about research funding information and opportunities, and some of the practice and experience on research funding achievement. My name is Shandong Wu. I'm an associate professor at the University of Pittsburgh. I co-organized this tutorial with Dr. Behrouz Shabestari.
Hi, I am Behrouz Shabestari. Thank you, Shandong. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Hopefully, we get some good outcome from this. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure today to co-hold this meeting with you. We want to thank our sponsors, Pittsburgh Center for AI Innovation in Management. So we're honored to have 8 speakers today with a lineup of great talks. So we first have 4 speakers from funding agencies in the United States, France, and Germany. Those program officers will help us navigate through various research programs, funding mechanisms and opportunities. We also have 4 grantee speakers who will share their experience and practices on research funding application and grant writing experience. So we hope this tutorial will be beneficial for attendees of MICCAIs, from students to established investigators, and we encourage participation for the discussion with a great panel today. So this is our agenda. We have 2 sessions, and there is a 10 minutes break between the session. And so a few notes. So there will be a dedicated Q&A and discussion session at the end of each session. And you can ask questions using the chat box or raise your hand function. So if there are many questions hard to handle, we will invite you directly ask your question. So using raise hand function. Please mute yourself while not talking, and 8 talks will be recorded. Okay, without further ado, let's begin with session 1. Our first speaker is Dr. Behrouz Shabestari. He is acting director of the Division of Health Informatics Technologies and the director of the NIBIB National Technology Centers Program. Before joining NIBIB, he was an officer in the Scientific Review Office at NIH. He has been involved in a broader range of funding mechanisms, and he has extensive experience in areas of industry and medical imaging. Behrouz, please go ahead, share your screen.
Thank you. Thanks for the kind introduction. You see my screen?
Yeah, perfect. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I'm going to talk very briefly about NIH and then talk about NIBIB and some of the opportunity we have that, and I'm hoping that in the end, not learn from you guys about the other agency and to be able to see if we can find some way of that we can collaborate that as a global help and help the globally all of the investigators. NIH is a part of the HHS, and NIH supports institutions and people. Extramural research, there's about 4,000 institutions and 300,000 scientists and researchers. The 85% of the NIH budget goes to the funding. And then we also have an intramural, these are the lab that inside the NIH, and there's about 6,000 scientists there, and those use 10% of the NIH budget. If you calculate that, it's only 5% goes to the staff. The NIH has 27 institute and center, and 3 of them are the center, 27 are the institute that they support the different diseases like cancer, heart and lung, or the drug abuse. So they have a different one, and then each one are kind of independent, but they follow the same rules. The center, they do no funding. This clinical center and also the Center for Information Technology and Center for Scientific Review that it does all the review. NIBIB is one of the institute and is the smallest one actually. The total budget for the NIH for 2021 is $43 billion. The mission of NIH is, many of you would know, that is a medical and behavioral research, fundamental knowledge, and learning those in the living system and the application of that knowledge. Basically, mostly is a biomedical and clinical research, disease and diagnostic oriented, and applied research. NIBIB, as I said, is a smaller institute and is about 400 million comparing to the 43 billion. So it's about 1% of the budget. It goes to NIBIB. NIBIB mission is development and accelerating the application of biomedical technology and design and engineering of the platform and clinical application. When we do clinical application, we only do phase 1, not only the validation. And then we are mostly disease agnostic. Let's go for a specific or the disease or diagnostic. Our director puts the NIBIB in the center because it helps all the other institutes. It's only NIBIB because it's technology development. It works with all of the other institutes, even it works with the clinical center. And as I mentioned, it's 410 million on the budget. We have 4 divisions: Division of Applied Science and Technology, Division of Health Informatics that I lead, and Division of Discovery and Technology and the Training. And if the area that I have highlighted in blue, those are the areas that can be useful for MICCAI attendees. All of the imaging, all the informatics, and some of the modeling, and even the training, they will be benefit all the MICCAI attendees, and they receive grants from these divisions. Our new director, actually it's been 3 years, Dr. Bruce Stromberg, usually puts the computational methods, data science, modeling, and AI and machine learning in the center that we held all the area, engineered biology, sensor and point of care, imaging technology, and all the therapeutics. They all need some way of computational methods. So the Division of Health Informatics on the computer and basically serving all other divisions with the technology as well. Gonna go briefly over the mechanism that we have. As I mentioned, our mission is transforming through the engineering and understanding of disease and its prevention, detection, diagnosis, and treatment. We are a technology development institute, so if there's a technology that is being developed for the cancer only, it will go to Cancer Institute. We do a broad technology development. The technology development NIBIB does, it can be validated for the cancer, but it should be applicable for the other diseases as well. So the major mechanism that we use is one is the R01, that is a parent, is very popular. There's a 500,000 a year for 5 years. You have to have a preliminary data, and this is it should be feasibility should be done, and this is one of those that many people use it, and is kind of for the investigators. Is they usually get it 10-year, and other one with getting the R01 is very known mechanism, and it gets them out of the new investigator. I will explain that later. Then we have other one that bioengineering research partnership. This is the same as R01. It needs the data but requires partnership and is a bigger grant. It goes all the way to 750,000 and is a U01. The difference between U and R is that the R is a research, U is a contract. U is a contract application. They need a milestone, and they gets renewed year by year. Recently, we're very supportive of new investigator, and I hope we talk about it today, that there's a new call for the new investigator is a Stephen Katz Award. This is for early stage investigator. Early stage investigators, the investigators that they are in the first 10 years after the graduation. And those can submit for this. There's no competition with the senior people. I will explain more on this one because I have a slide for it. Then we have a small business and SBIR, that is for the small business, as STTR, that is a small business, but in collaboration with the university. There's a two phase. We can fund phase 1 and phase 2, or combination of both phase. Then we have academic research enhancement, that is 300,000 for 3 years. This is for the area grants. These are R15. These are for the places that they do not receive any funding from NIH, and they can apply for this one. It gets reviewed differently, and they get some benefit on that one. Then we have something called Art Small Research Grant. I have seen the misspelled there. Is the RR03, and that is 50,000 for 2 years. It's just for the newcomers that they can collect data and do some feasibility study to a startup. Then we have some featured resources, Trailblazer and National Technology Center. I will talk about MEDRIC, and point of care technology is another area that we're very active on. We also have all kinds of training grants for the postdoctoral and predoctoral. It can be initiated by the grantees or initiated by the individual. And we also have a career development award. Trailblazer is something that is only for NIH, is a R21. R21 have to be opposite of R01. They have to be high risk, high impact application. It should have no preliminary data. These are 400,000 a year for 3 years. And it should be, as I said, no preliminary data, and has to be only early investigator or new investigator. New investigator definition at NIH, as long as you do not have R01 or major award, you'll be considered as a new investigator, and does not, regardless of how many years you are in the work. I mentioned the Katz Award. This is again new, is for early stage investigator. Keep in mind, this is not for new investigators. They have to be within the first 10 years. Early stage investigator, the caveat for this is they have to have a kind of a change in direction of their research. What does that mean is not clear to me yet, but basically it's not that to change completely from one area to the other area. It would be from one organ to other organ, or one disease to another disease, or adding AI or anything like that. P41 is something that, P41 Center, or is National Center for Biomedical Imaging and Bioengineering, is something that I manage. We have 26 of them. These are major centers all over the United States. They're supposed to have a national impact. These are the same as 3 R01 put together, that we call it technology research and development. And they also have this technology research and development. They have to be collaborating with each other. They have to have a synergy with each other. And these are the research and technology center. Basically, their job is to develop the technology and disseminate this technology and train the people. These are for very senior people. For the PI, they have to be senior and well-known in the field. They do have about 10 service projects and 10 collaborative projects. Service and collaborative projects both receive output or technology or methodology from the center. Collaborative projects, they have to push the center back for additional technology development. So they pull the technology from the center, but they have to push back to the center for new technology development. All of the service and technology project, they have to have a funded grant. So these have to have a funded to be able to collaborate. And those funding, it doesn't have to be from NIH, would be international, could be internal, could be from NSF or any other places. And they have to have a complete training for the clinician, new investigators, for the graduate students, scientists, and postdoc. For the COVID, NIH funded a medical imaging and data resource center called MedRIC. This is funded, is a $10 million a year for 2 years to deal with the COVID issue and COVID data. It is involved the major organization here, RSNA, the ACR, and the AAPM, and is managed by or administered by University of Chicago. The goal is to collect the medical images and associated clinical data for COVID-19, and then create a data common infrastructure and process, and then use AI and ML for those images. So basically they start collecting the images, including, then they do ID identification, curation, abstraction, and quality assessment, and then annotation. They make this data available for the public. It will be available for everyone to download this data and use it, and everyone can upload their data to the center. And our goal is basically to continue this after 2 years to cover all images. Hopefully we can receive a funding. Basically, MedRIC is a large repository plus AI. It's been 1 year, and so far they have about 62,000 chest X-ray and CT data. And from there they have done quality and harmonization on those, that there are about 49,000 of those. And then they have done further work, that is, they have about 13,000 that public available high quality data and for the imaging study. And they start working on AI and ML. So far they have about 20 algorithms that cover segmentation along lung opacity and severity of the hospital stay. But they've been every day, if you go to their website, that is medric.org, every day you can see this table is changing. I was going very fast to talk about this if I had time. I think I'm running out of time. Writing for the new investigator, writing a winning award, it would be the major issue is you have to say, what is the important problem to need to be solved? What do you intend to do? Do you have the team that it can do that? What has already been done? Is it feasible or not? And how are you going to do it? Because an NIBIB or NIH application gets reviewed based on significance, innovation, investigators, approach, and environment. And successful application has to be impactful, well-focused, and novel, and basically understandable by intelligent readers, expert or non-expert, and has to be well justified with the budget and the people. This is my last slide. As I mentioned, we do significant innovation investigator approach and environment for the review, and you have to outline for a good application the specific aims, and the specific aims includes why this problem is important, where the challenges are, mention what those 3 aims are, and talk about the team and their competency and expert, and then what happens when you succeed. It's very important that when they review the application, the reviewer do not end up with the question of so what. It has to have an impact. And the score from 1 to 9, 1 is being the best, and all the criteria get scored. This is NIBIB team, and thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Behrouz, for this informative talk. Let's move on to next talk. As I said, so all the Q&A sessions will be at the end of the session, so ask your question in the chat box. So let's move on to next talk. Our second speaker is Dr. Dominique Dunon-Bluteau. He is head of the Department of Biology and Health at ENR France. He has worked years at University Périgueux and Merville-Curie as a group leader in the developmental cell biology, where he also served as Dean of the Faculty of Biology. He was a scientific advisor at the French Embassy in Switzerland, and also member of the Cabinet of Minister of French Higher Education and Research. He was Scientific Deputy Director at Institute of Biology in charge of interdisciplinary research program in implementation before he joined ANR. Dr. Dunon-Bluteau, the floor is yours.
Okay, hello, I will start to share my screen. Thank you, Shandong. No.
Go to the bottom, share screen.
Yeah, okay. Do you see it?
Perfect, good, yeah.
So just I will start. I will present the funding opportunities at Renner.
Oh, sorry, Dominique. Right now, I don't see the slide. I saw that in the first second, and then there's no. I see the PowerPoint, but I don't see the. I see kind of like a black or blue kind of a background.
And in this way, you see it or not?
I can see that. Yeah. Can you try to play? When you play it, I don't see the.
And in this case,
I don't see it. It's not properly show up here. Can someone else show that? See that? Like.
I will start. Okay, so I'll try again. Okay.
Yeah, maybe try one more time.
Is it okay or not?
Can you try to play it? To present it?
Okay, I can try. Do you see
Yeah,
it?
you can just go this way if that's better.
It's okay or not?
No, I still cannot see it. Anyone else in the audience can see that? So I can see your slides when not in the playing mode. Once you're trying to play, you play that. I just see black sort of background, no actual.
Yeah, it's the same. Why don't you just use it? Don't play it, just use it.
Yeah, don't play it. Just go back. Just in the yeah.
This is okay.
Yeah, this is fine.
Yeah, this is fine.
Okay, so I will just give to start. I would like to tell that ANR is just a funding agency, and we don't have any scientists doing research in our agency. We are funding projects. As you can see, the budget last year was 780 million euros, and this year, since we have a new law which governs science, we got an important increase of our budget. It will go on to increase in the next few years. So it changed a little bit the capacity to fund project now. So this is a work program for 2022. The different landscape of calls for proposals. So we have the first one is a generic call for proposals. It's a generic call. It means that it's investigator driven. It's called AAPG, and it corresponds to 80% of ANR budget. We have 5 funding instruments. I will describe them on the next slide. And there are 56 scientific evaluation committees, which cover all scientific fields, including social science, etc., and exact sciences. And 4 of these committees are related to MICCAI fields. In addition to this generic call for proposal, we have a specific call for proposals. The previous call is yearly, so each year you have 1 generic call. And the specific calls for proposal, it's different, it's completely directed on subject. And we have three types of specific calls. The first one are European and international. bi or trilateral. We have also the tools of the European Commission, GPI, RANET, etc., and some other instruments I will not describe here. The second type of specific calls are focused on public-private partnerships. It's PRPP, LabCom, Industry Share, and also some other tools I will not describe here. I will explain a little bit later. And finally, we have a challenge or flash announced on the website of Renner, and in fact, it corresponds to specific crises or new catastrophes or new emerging ideas, and we have a specific call on that. Last year, we had 3 flashes event on COVID-19, and we funded almost 300 projects for 35 million euros. So what is interesting on this slide was the call which are in red concerns the MICCAI field. So I will just present some example of this call for MICCAI, for the MICCAI fields. So the generic call, APG, you have 5 instruments. The first one is young researcher projects. It means that the applicant should have got his PhD less than 10 years ago. The second one is a new instrument, which is called the PRME, Team Research Project. In fact, it's open to scientists a little bit older than young researchers. The third one is collaborative research project. So it means that you have 2 or more teams which collaborate to promote a project, to create a project. The fourth one is collaborative research project, including enterprise, so public-private project. And the last one is international collaborative research project, PRC1. It's bilateral, and it's limited to a list of countries. And as we can, I can already mention that in fact the countries, it's open to German-speaking countries, DFG for Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and also some other countries, not for all fields, but for specific fields, where Singapore, Taiwan, and also NSF, but unfortunately it doesn't cover the MICCAI fields. It's physics of living system, and it's also digital sciences, but we don't cover this field for the moment. It can change, but for the moment it's not the case. About the 56 axes, among the 56 axes, 4 of them are dedicated to MICCAI fields, and you see the 3 of them are dedicated to interdisciplinary research projects. So you have healthcare technologies, interfaces between mathematics, digital sciences on one side, and health and biology on the other side. Digital revolution in relationship to knowledge and culture, so it corresponds mainly to educating project or learning project, and you'll see, I will give you some examples. And the last axis is covering human-machine interaction and autonomous and interactive robotics. And for this year, so I mean for the project which will be funded in 2022, the deadline of the call is 28th October. So it's for the scientists, it's time to write the project. So some details about this axis. So the first one, healthcare technologies, you can see it's instrumentation detection system. I will not read everything, and imaging agents for anatomic, functional, etc. And surgical technologies, including teleoperation materials and instrument implantable devices. So in the last 3 years, this year is not finished, I mean about 21. So the last 3 years, we funded 29 projects for 13.7 million euros. And as you can see on the right, almost half of the project correspond to collaborative project with an enterprise, with a company. There is a list of examples of projects which are funded, and you have also the budget, so you can see the amount of money, which is a marginal cost, it's not full cost. And this is, I will not describe everything. I will let the example for the participant. We can read the type of budget of subject we found. The second axis is interfaces between mathematics, digital science, health and biology. So the objective is to strengthen the cross-fertilization of these two fields in order to bring out new concepts, models, or methods in mathematics and digital science to accelerate research in the field of biology and health. So in the last 4 years, it's 26 funded projects on MICCAI teams for 10.6 million euros. And as you can see in this axis, this field, these MICCAI teams correspond almost to between one third, around a little bit more than 1/3 of the project funded. So it's really interesting to note. So another list of projects which were funded these last years, just for the researcher to know exactly which kind of project can be elaborate to apply, can be deposited to this committee. H15, so digital revolution in relationship to knowledge and culture. It's not directly focused on MICCAI fields, but since these last 6 years, 4 projects are on these themes. And in this case, you have the list, we have these 4 projects, and you see better acceptance for a better efficiency of brain-computer interface-based stroke rehabilitation. I will go to the third one, body-involved interactive tools for active learning of anatomy, etc., etc. And the last axis of the general call, it's interaction and robotics. So you have computer-aided medical intervention projects and surgical robotics, soft robots. In this case, 13 projects funded on MICCAI teams for between 2015 and 2020 for 4.6 million euros. And mainly you see that it's showing young researchers and collaborative project research, project. And once more, a list of projects which were funded during these last years in this committee. So now we go to the specific call, and the first one is a trilateral call in artificial intelligence, which associates France, Japan, and Germany. And we can have some of these projects which concern MICCAI fields. The 2 examples we have identified, it's ICOG, artificial intelligence for aging societies, from basic concept to practical tools for AI facilitated cognitive training. And the second one is knowledge enhanced information extraction across language for pharmacovigilance. The next specific call say artificial intelligence shares. In fact, roughly the ANR put maximum 600 euros per project, and these shares are co-funded either by a public institution or private company. And you have 3 examples of this artificial intelligence shares. So you have Alexandre Gramfort, Bridging Artificial Intelligence and Neuroscience, Rémi Bardonnet, Bayesian Learning of Expensive Models with Application to Cell Biology, and Bertrand Thirion, Knowledge and Representation Integration on the Brain. Another call about public and private partnership. LabCom, in fact, associate an academic research team with a company. And the purpose is to create a long-term collaboration. It means we expect to have a 10-year collaboration between the research team and the companies. This is the purpose. And so we associate the two entities. This is an example, augmented reality for surgery. I will not read everything on this on this slide. You can read it, and you are specialists of this field, which is not my case. And this is also an opportunity to link an academic lab with a company. And in this case, the company may get some money. Usually, the money is only given to the public laboratory, but in this case, there is some money for the company itself. And I will end with the second mission of INR, because I only presented the calls and the calls for researchers. And we have a second mission. We are operator for the National Investment for the Future and for the state. And in this case, there are specific tools which are more ambitious and which correspond to infrastructure. And among these instruments of the investment of future, we have the first one is EHU, which is a call for hospital university in different fields. And one of these EHU, there are six EHU in France at the beginning. And one of them was the Institute of Image-Guided Surgery in Strasbourg. It has been funded with 80.3 million euros for the period 2011 to 2025. So the Institute is a unique medical and surgical center dedicated to the management of digestive disease. It's an healthcare center offering personalized treatment using the least invasive techniques, a research center gathering teams to design and develop instruments and the procedure for the future, and an international training center for professionals and students driven to learn the most advanced minimally invasive practices. This is an example. We can also find some project in other initiative or other instruments of the investment of future. IDEFI, it's a program for more dedicated to the teaching of new scientists, teaching to scientists, to science. And the second one is LabEx. LabEx is for Laboratory of Excellence. So it's a way to fund very, very good laboratories in France. So I'm sure I didn't answer to all questions on this field. So I thank you for your attention. I think you can also join me by my email address, and I will also spread the information to my colleagues, which are specialists for digital sciences in our institution. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dominique, for great talk. It's very good to learn a lot of different program and calls at ANR. Some questions we can discuss in the discussion session. Thank you again for this wonderful talk. Let's move on. So our third speaker today is Dr. Wendy Nilsen. She is a program director for the Smart and Connected Health program in the Directorate for Computer and Information Science and Engineering at the National Science Foundation in the United States. Her work focuses on the intersection of technology and health, including a wide range of methods for data collection, analytics, and turning data to knowledge. She chairs or leads many funding programs at NSF and also serves on numerous federal technology initiatives. Previously, Dr. Nilsen was at the NIH Office of Behavioral and Social Science Research Program. Okay, Dr. Nilsen, please go ahead, share your screen.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. And thank you so much for having me here. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the things we can do at NSF, and it'll kind of build on what my colleagues have, but in a slightly different focus. So trying to get things to move here. So I just want to say, for NSF, we have a very different focus than my colleagues like at NIVIB, where health, medical imaging, rehabilitation research can be found in many areas of NSF, and they're in many of the crosscuts. But for us, this is really use-inspired basic research. Our mission and our function is really in scientific advances in the NSF sciences. So for us, it's computer and information science and engineering. We have an engineering core, we have chemistry, we have math, physical sciences, we have bio. So social and behavioral sciences. So we have all of these areas where that's where the advance has to be. And the health research aspects are really important, but they really are kind of, for us, secondary to these advances in the fundamental science, which this really allows us to do a lot of really creative and exciting projects, because we're really, if we fail in one way, we can succeed in another. So I think it makes it an interesting way to think about this, but just understand it's this use-inspired basic research. So I do want to say that much of what the work that happens around that includes, that targets health, medical imaging, any of that happens in the division I'm in, the Information and Intelligence Systems Division. And this is really the nexus of data, computing, and intelligence. It really brings everything together and puts the humans in it. So we have 3 different core areas. We have a robust intelligence core, which has our computer vision, by the way. But we also, that's our entire artificial intelligence, machine learning. Actually, everybody, all of our divisions, all of our clusters do machine learning. Information and integration and informatics. Really, this is the data life cycle. So we get a lot of informatics work, but also a lot of machine learning, data mining, AI. And our human-centered computing, this is where our humans really interact with the data. And so that's assistive technology. We do a lot of medical imaging interpretation in there to understand how do humans understand when we're using AI for this. Robust intelligence, I'll just tell you briefly kind of what they're doing. They really are a computational understanding of intelligence. And there's a range of systems here, a lot of theoretical work in this area. And as you can see through this, we use a variety of modeling or reasoning approaches here, and use real-time data and demonstrating, so really to try to see how do we drive intelligence broadly defined across the whole areas of science. So we have many, many different areas in that. In information integration and informatics, our III core, oops, I've lost the bottom of this. This really is the data life cycle. So it's all the way from, we know we have huge amounts of data, and I've heard that from my colleagues. We're really looking at how do we create the infrastructure and science to drive the next layer of data storage, data sharing, information and informatics, as well as visualization. And our human-centered core really looks at processional, but it looks at all sorts of ways to think about it. But I think the processional and cognitive really comes into medical imaging. They're really interesting in that. How do the physical and the virtual interact? And how do the social and societal issues come together? So I'm going to talk to you now about some crosscuts that actually target the health world. And the first one is it's a joint program with NSF and NIH, and it's smart health and biomedical research in the era of artificial intelligence and advanced data science. Yes, that's what happens when you partner in a way. You end up with very long titles. But the smart health is really, again, it's targeting use-inspired basic research. And this is a 3-year program, up to $1.2 million in total cost, up to 4 years. And really what we're trying to do here is bring teams together at the very beginning. This is early stage prototype level work. This is not ready for the NIH R01s or even the R21 or whatever, all the other things that Behrouz responds to. But this is really, really early work. And so it's high risk, high reward. And most of these projects end up with a prototype at the end. So they're very early stage. And when we think about use-inspired basic research, for those of you that know Don Stokes, you'll know these are really, you think about us as Niels Bohr in that quest for basic understanding. We're famous for that fundamental science research. But I think of this much more like Louis Pasteur. He was solving fundamental biology problems, but within a social context. Steve Jobs does interesting work, but he's using existing science. So for me, that wouldn't make a good, the Steve Jobs approach to a health or an imaging problem wouldn't work because it's not advancing new science. And of course, nobody wants to be the last quadrant. So our goals here are really to support the research and development. We are looking at for transformative, high risk, high reward advances in the fundamental sciences. So again, we have to have a really interesting biomedical or public health problem, but we have to have those fundamental advances in the computer information science, engineering, math, stats, behavioral or cognitive science. So they're really, we're not overlapping with NIH in that way, because our focus is really, or normal NIH science in that way, because we're really trying to push these fundamental advances. So we're looking for research gaps that exist. So when people send me proposals, I don't want to see us, I don't want to, all of the summary is about health problems. What I want to know is, if you're going to bring an AI approach to a medical imaging problem, I want to know what's the science that's generalizable beyond this problem. So if you're trying to do a new way of looking at unsupervised learning, if you're trying to do automated annotation, all sorts of things, what kind of problems exist in the field as a whole? And how can you bring it here to solve this key health or biomedical problem? And I want to see the right team. The teams are critical, because what we're trying to do is make sure that when you get to the end of this prototype, that you have the team and the expertise needed, that you can move this program along. We started this because we saw too many projects that started in NSF that were great science, but they didn't have the right team. They often weren't addressing the right problem. And they couldn't get any farther, and that's a waste. We really want our science to get out into the community, and to do that, you need the right teams. So these are our research thrusts. As you can see, we have many of them, but I think what's important is here in the center, it's really what people bring us as their ideas. These are important areas to us, and you can see medical image interpretation is a big one. We have a very large portfolio of medical image interpretation and analysis. So, but we really are looking for new ideas, and I think we're assuming we don't know exactly what the problems can be, and people can bring them. I also want to say another one we see a lot of medical image and imaging type problems is in the cyber-physical systems, and cyber-physical systems are really closed loop or human in the loop. So doing analytics in real time on images and providing information either to someone who can take action or to take action directly. CPS, you think about closed loop, I think the artificial pancreas is one of the best examples in the health world. But I think it's really important to realize, that this is a whole science area, and it's real-time integration, and there's controls. Safety is a big part here, but we do a lot in this medical space with images to try to get information in real time to have a system learn. So it's not just, I'll do this and we'll see if it impacts. CPS really has to have an impact, and it has to be assessing that impact. So I think about this as sense, actuate, and control. So there's a lot of interest in that area. So I think it's important. Sometimes people come to me and say, why can't I do a cyber physical system? I have cyber and I have a physical world, but we really need these deep integration. Computation and communication with these physical systems has to be required. So as you can see, they can be with a human in the loop, but they can also be an automated system. And with CPS, we're looking for conventional and unconventional substrates and platforms. So we can do some really amazing projects in here. So it's something people should consider. I also want to talk about smart and connected communities, because we see all sorts of interesting questions here too. This is an area for us that we're making a growing contribution to. And it really is, how do we connect all of these variables together? So it's the biomedical is no longer separate from the transportation, the civil systems, the water systems. How do we bring them all together? And it really comes out of the CPS world, closing the loop, but it really integrates multiple systems. So for us, it's a very broad view. It really is trying to get a sustainable community. So there's all sorts of interesting questions that happen in this initiative. So I suggest looking at it because it's really interesting. I just want to end with a couple of areas that I think are really important as people are growing their career in this area. And the NSF Early Career Development Program, the Career, is a really, really nice way for people to show off their fabulous science. And it's one of our most prestigious awards. And I know some of the people that I recognized here had already gotten their career. And I think that's, it really is a kind of an interesting program for that. It's a 5 years of stable support. So we really give researchers the time and money to be able to build out a foundation. But it also is the integration of research and education. So we don't want just top researchers in their lab alone. We want them teaching and bringing that to the broader scientific community through education, through outreach, and also, of course, to traditionally underrepresented groups in science and engineering. So for the career, when I talk to people thinking about, it's got to be the NSF science areas. Remember, this is a cross NSF initiative. So, you know, is it a 5-year project? Some of the questions I know people here are working on, these are big 5-year questions. Is your department supportive? Are you committed to these goals of your career? I mean, sometimes people are early in their career and they're dabbling in multiple areas. The career kind of locks you into a trajectory, doesn't limit you, but is this the right stage? Often people say, can I get it the first year? Most people are not integrated at that point. Sorry, my slide just moved on its own. And then did you talk to mentors, others? It's always important when you're thinking about this, talk to your program officer, but talk to mentors, others, other people that you could work with who can talk to you about these things. Finally, I want to talk about the CRII, unfortunately named the CRI. This is our early research initiative. And it's an interesting program. And it really, we are looking to, this is a pre-career initiative. It really is looking for research independence, especially those people that don't have early career support from startups and all sorts of things. So we want to develop the collaborations, but these really, we're looking for people that they're in an academic position, but they don't have support for up to 48 months of graduate student support. So their startups don't have that money. They don't have that yet. So what I want people to think about is if you don't have enough money for graduate students for 48 months, this is an initiative you should be looking at because that's who it's designed for. We know having graduate students really helps advance your science. So again, but talk to a program officer. Look at our site. Look at awards that have previously been done. If you're wondering what Smart Health does, look at our awards. You know, look at any of our awards because I think you'll find there's lots of things in these areas that might be of interest, but you also want to know what's happening out there. We also have this, I know we're taping, but I'm sure willing to share my slides. We have a Smart Health community listserv. So if people are interested in joining, please you can actually send me an email and I'll sign you up. So I just want people to remember all of these initiatives, if we don't have a relay with basic fundamental science and translational research, if we don't do that, we're not going to get the change that we want. And it takes a lot of work to do this basic and applied science relays, but I think we can do it and make a huge change. So with that, that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nilsen, for this great talk. We will leave questions at the end. We are early, but we can move on to the next speaker. So our next speaker is Dr. Christine Renner. He is a program director for medical imaging and the deputy head of the Unit for Scientific Instrumentation and Information Technology at DFG, Germany. He has studied physics, followed by biology, and he has been also a group leader for the NMR spectroscopy in the Department of Nobel laureate Professor Robert Huber at the Max Planck Institute for Biochemistry. He was a lecturer in physical chemistry as well before he joined DFG in 2006. He has published about 80 peer-reviewed papers from his own research and numerous policy papers on behalf of the DFG. Dr. Renner, please go ahead, share your screen.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So, wait a second. So at DFG, I'm more or less responsible for coordinating the medical imaging and the medical technology research across different program lines and also across different units, because we are organized in, where is this? Sorry. We are organized at DFG in more like discipline-specific units that work together with the program-specific units in devising quite a number of streams, as I will show in a moment. Okay, so my background, I'm a physicist. My background is in biophysics and in magnetic resonance. So it was quite easy for me to enter the field of magnetic resonance tomography, obviously, and medical imaging and so on. And I would like to talk about first about DFG and then a little bit more general also about funding mechanisms. So the DFG is an organization under private law, which is important in some regard, but we operate also on mostly on public money, which we distribute. The DFG is open to all fields of science, including the humanities, and it's based, the selection criteria are more or less all based on scientific criteria. DFG is mostly funding research at universities, but also at the Max Planck Institutes and Helmholtz centers, which are research performing organizations in Germany. And here are highlighted a few statements from our statutes that define the mission of DFG. So as I mentioned, you see on the right side, the distribution in the single grant program across the different disciplines and scientific areas. And more or less every topic that you could imagine can be sorted in somewhere. And it's color-coded according to engineering, including informatics, the natural sciences, life sciences, and humanities and social sciences. On the left, there is showing that we fund individual projects, consortia, large consortia, and also infrastructure, both infrastructure consortia as well as also major research instrumentation. So we have a bit more than 3 billion euro budget, and quite a number of projects currently funded. And this is the funding portfolio, and I'm of course not going to explain everything, just to show that at DFG you can find for very diverse kinds of support that you might need at whatever stage in your academic career you're in, whatever problem you have to fund, because DFG is helping with money. It's not helping, it's also doing some policy advice, but mostly it's helping with money. And I've highlighted in red on the left the Moderator program, which is a startup program for giving scientific independence. It used to be 5 years, now it's 6 years, or 3 + 3 years startup for your own group. It's very substantial funding, often as between 1 and 2 million euros for 5 to 6 years. And it has also been, for example, the template for the European, for the ERC starting grants, which you might know from the European Research Council. And in the one in blue, boxed in blue, this is the individual research grants, which is the majority in terms of number, and it's about 1/3 of the budget, I think, in terms of money. So this is very important because of mass, and you can have any kind of research in there, and everybody who is doing research at any institution, more or less. And one thing I personally like very much is the one below, is the Reinhard Koselleck projects. They are actually quite few, but they are high risk, high gain projects. And this is for especially for established researchers that have a very visionary idea, which they cannot describe in an exact work program and milestones and so on, but that they have an idea what they could be doing in the next years, and where they need roughly about 1 million euros. And it's just 5 pages for the scientific case. And So this is a very interesting way of funding in my view, because it's very much based on the trust in the person and the innovative visionary goal or aim that's being written down. And either you can convince quickly that this is something really you should try or not. So it's one, actually, it's my, I think probably it's my favorite of all of these ones. And I had a number of them in medical imaging also. So extremely fast neuroimaging, for example, was one of the COSELEC projects where I could not at all be sure that this will really work. But the person was very experienced, and if somebody in Germany would succeed in this, then it could be this person. Okay, and then on the right hand there is a prize. The Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz Prize is actually the most prestigious prize in Germany, I believe, and it's yeah. This is also, of course, then it's not based on an application, it's an award to honor not the life, say, lifetime achievements, but more in the middle of a career, maybe. And it gives money with very little prescription what to do with it. So it opens also the possibilities for funding research that maybe in other programs could not be funded. So the grantees, awardees, they can use it for whatever they want to. And currently, I think it's like 2 million euros for experimental sciences and 1 point something for theoretical sciences. So very nice. Anyway, it goes across the board and you can do many, many, many things. There is also, we are involved in some structural initiatives in Germany. And it's quite diverse how DFG is involved in each of these projects, which is about the research data. Germany is building a national research data consortium already. The Verein, what is it in English? So it has been founded, and consortia are joining this, and it's being built up. It's a 900 million euro initiative over 10 years, and DFG in this case is not only carrying out the selection of the consortia, but it's also giving the money. Whereas, for example, for the National High Performance Computing, we selected the centers that participate in the National High Performance Computing, but we do not give the money. It's going directly from the states to the individual centers. It depends. And we have a very interesting next generation sequencing network, which is a new form in funding projects, which kind of vouchers for sequencing, where the money goes directly to the sequencing centers, but the projects get a guarantee that they get the sequencing amount they require. And this is for reasons that it's sometimes difficult to give the money to the project. It's difficult in financial terms for individual projects to handle also the money, and we have devised this network for organizing better the sequencing, the alignment, and assignment of sequencing tasks to specialized centers. So we are experimenting a little bit in this regard with a mixture of project funding and infrastructure. And then we have major implementation initiatives which pick up very early new technology for exploring their scientific possibilities. And in this case, you get the instrument to show what it can do, not because you have a work plan and the milestones, what you can actually achieve, just for a little bit for trying out. Now also we have this policy papers, which is the current form of publication that I'm into. This is also kind of peer review, but in a different way, because you have to get together with colleagues, and you have to write up some strategy papers with other organizations to make them a good compromise between different viewpoints, and also then try to see how you can put them forward. And this is what I show here. It's a lot about here infrastructure, efficient operation and access of infrastructures again. Then there is something about data management. And we are involved in some European discussions, often with the ANR, for example, and other European partners. So actually we do also, this is an interesting picture, and it reminds me that I should acknowledge that those slides have not been done by myself, but by colleagues who do nice slides. The following slides will not be so nice in terms of the style. But actually, DFG was historically for decades involved also in funding expeditions like this with the polar research ships. And we do not fund big science like particle accelerators, because from a budget of 3 billion. So if we would pay the contribution to CERN for Germany and then also pay for the FAIR laser in Hamburg or the FAIR it's not in particle in atomic physics, in Darmstadt. So money would be immediately spent and nothing left for the projects. But we contribute, for example, on these ships. There are for example, the submarine vehicles that robotic vehicles that can go to the ground and explore the ocean ground. And also, for example, they search for parts of crashed planes. In some cases, if you have a plane which unfortunately crashes into the sea, so it's very diverse, and on projects also. And also, I listed the COVID. In the beginning of the COVID pandemic, this ship, they had problems in carrying out the expedition, and so DFG supported some money because they had to go. I forgot the reason. For some reason, they had to go to Spitsbergen and have an extra stop, which with these ships is easily costs like 100,000 euros or something, and they just received some help so they can change their routes. And yeah, fortunately, DFG could manage quite flexibly some help, especially in the beginning of the pandemic when there were no established procedures. So now are the slides I did by myself, so they are just some text. And I'd like to talk about the funding mechanisms at DFG, especially at DFG, maybe also in part in general. A colleague of mine, I think he phrased this very well, that how DFG works is that the DFG, especially the DFG head office and also the diverse bodies of DFG, everyone is listening to researchers, what's going on in research, and tries to translate what we see as input and feedback and whatever comes across to shape the funding procedures. So to translate what we hear from what's going on in research in Germany into funding programs and calls. And for example, the sequencing initiative was exactly this. People saying, oh, it's so difficult, the projects, they will not be funded. If I apply for 150,000 euro sequencing, it's much too expensive, and so on and so on. The others say, oh, we got the sequencing machines, but people do not come to us. They want to buy their own. And how can we organize this more efficient? How can we also, when the companies, negotiating with companies, it's so stupid, everybody's negotiating by themselves. And so we set up the joint initiative, and in the end also DFG negotiated with the company for all of the contracts, for all of the places. Okay, the decisions are made by the bodies of DFG, so it's not ministries. In our case, it's not in ministries. Usually you would have a political decision at the end, which is fine for the ministry. We are a private law organization, and our bodies with the scientists, they decide. And we have administrative rules which make life more predictable maybe, but not always more easier. And I'm always, when talking about research science, of course, I always include all branches, including the humanities. So I'd like to mention a few points about grantsmanship. In general, so this will be the first of two aspects. When you want to engage with DFG, you want maybe to get money. So this is usually the first thing you want from DFG is money. Later, then you discover it's more than just getting money where it's offered. It's maybe then that you want to have the money offered to you and not just search for where it's being offered. Okay, but first, say as a young researcher at the beginning of your career, you want to have your first grant, and then you should consider grantsmanship. And this is true, I think, for all the funding organizations, everyone we heard today and many others, and also wherever you go, that you should write up good proposals in the way you write them. And I'm surprised actually that so many of these proposals are written really badly, where you prevent yourself from better chances for funding. And the important thing is that this is under your control. You cannot control the money that's at this stage, and what I'm talking about the budget of a call. You cannot control what the bodies will decide if they like your topic or not, but you can control whether your proposal is a good one in the way it's written. And so I suggest ask yourself, first of all, what do you like about the proposal? I'm sure that many proposals I see, it's not possible that the people that write can like them. I mean, it starts with the typos. If you have a bunch of typos every page and it's written in a letter 8-point Arial or what, you cannot read it in any case, I don't know. So yeah, but then very important, of course, you should ask yourself, how would you rate this proposal? How would you comment this if you were given this to review? I mean, peer review means you write proposals and you evaluate proposals, and you will be doing both again and again and again. And strangely, very experienced scientists that have received numerous funding, they still write proposals I'm fairly sure they would not like when they would be given them for reviewing. So ask yourself, would you like this if this was a proposal you should be reviewing? And then you have to think about that a DFG is a multi-step procedure. So first you have the written reviews, and then you have a panel, and the panel will select from those proposals that get good written reviews, which they will fund. So you do not only have to appeal to the peers that do the written review, but you have to be interesting for a panel that will select and spend the budget. And then also, and this is quite important, you should not only ask yourself what the funding organization can do for you, but what you can do for the funding organization as well. Because funding organizations, they have a purpose of funding research, spending money, doing something, and you can wonder if your proposal is a reply to what the organization wants to fund, or whether more or less maybe you want to get money despite the goals of the organization. You should be aware of this. And you heard in the previous talks what the intention of certain program lines are and what organizations like NSF want to fund. And if you present a proposal that simply does not answer this call, then of course it's not so fortunate. So then get informed funding requests. Please read the guidelines. So often people do not read the guidelines, do not believe them. Guidelines, all the organizations you hear today, the guidelines are written really to be read, and not I don't know what purpose they could have otherwise. And then also look at the review criteria. Oftentimes they will be published, and it's very helpful if you know what the reviewers will be asked, because they will be asked certain questions, and you have to answer those questions in your proposal. So look both at the guidelines and at the review criteria. This gives you a good view of the program. And also sometimes you can get explicit advice by calling, for example, or writing emails to program officers at DFG. You can do this anytime. And please do not ask them about the guidelines. So if people ask me, please, can you tell me how many pages my proposal can have? Then this is a very stupid question. Please do not ask stupid questions, but please feel welcome to ask qualified questions, and this can be really a help. Do not expect information which you cannot get, but use the information that is available and that can be provided to you. And be careful about rumors from colleagues that tell you, you have to do like this and this. I was successful because I printed everything in dark red. It can be possible, of course. You can. But this is a very small number evidence, of course. So be careful about the rumors, and I have to be careful about the time probably. But it doesn't matter. I can stop any time, and we can do the remaining things in the discussion. So it's the basic things I said about DFG already. Then reflect about correctness of decisions. So sometimes it appears to me that applicants, they believe that there is a right or wrong in funding, and it's not. There's no way to say that it's right that this should be funded, has to be funded. Correctness can only be in the procedure. So if it has not been reviewed, but simply been thrown to the dustbin, this is not correct decision. But if the peer review results into negative reviews and they say this is simply stupid research, then it's correct to reject this, although the topic might be Nobel Prize winning 10 years later. So this is, think about what is actually correctness of decisions and what you can expect from the decisions at a funding organization. And then do not be too optimistic. There is a tendency, I have to say, in some areas that people try to be more optimistic that they should. And it's very dangerous. If you do one step too much, if you try to be very optimistic, you do one step too much, and then it's everything explodes around you. At DFG, if you have a suspicion of scientific misconduct, your career might be completely stopped and you can just move to some other sectors. Do not try to test the limits of what is possible, in terms of what you may or may not do, of rules. Be very careful with good scientific practice, and it will not help you to be overly optimistic. So if people that write a paper submitted or in preparation, manuscript in preparation, when you list in a list of reference manuscript in preparation, this shows that you have done nothing proper. So this is no good. Yes, I will simply not talk about the second part. Maybe probably yes, Shandong, I should stop in 1 or 2 minutes, right?
You have 3 more minutes. Just go ahead. Don't worry.
Okay, very good. When you then at the DFG, you can spend your career with DFG programs and DFG funding, really. And when you have written more proposals, you receive more funding, then you might get an interest also in shaping the funding programs. And at DFG, this is possible. And you can get together with other people from your community. You can tell the program officers, the committees, you can present your own ideas. You should very early write it down so people can read this. And at DFG, there's a very good chance that you can influence how the programs develop over time. You have to be careful, of course. If you suggest that maybe the organization should be changed and you want our president to be removed, then this is not the best proposal making to our president, because she does not want to be removed at this stage, probably. And you have to think who will be your allies and who will be the opponents, who will like your suggestions and who not. And then you can start negotiating, and at DFG, you can really get involved shaping the programs. A label, sometimes you need to give things a name. If you have a new idea, give it a name so that you can refer to this. And sometimes if you are the first to put forward a certain number, like people saying, okay, every euro you invest in research infrastructure will give you 5 euros in terms of socio-economic impact. This is a great number. I mean, if you can come up with such kind of a number, then it's very, very good. Yeah, this is not so important. Here, this is my personal analysis of DFG. What's very good about DFG is DFG is very open. You have a peer review, scientific criteria. You have transparency. You know what's happening with your proposals. Very flexible funds, and you can more or less do anything if you have enough people that support you and if you have enough support from the panels. Weakness is it's slow. It's slow. You have to resubmit proposals even when there's only minor changes to be done. Time from submission to really funding can be long, 1 or 2 years if you do revisions. You get the money, but you get no help, especially in the startup phase when there's a small group. And sometimes it can be very difficult to match the funding circles and the people that you have to fund. And sometimes peer review can also be a little bit conservative if the panels more follow, they are not so open-minded, maybe. And the threat, in my view, is that the funding rates become too low, the times too long, so that it's not helpful to apply at DFG. And also DFG sometimes insists very strongly on not relating to socio-economic impact, which actually is not totally true. Because, for example, at COVID, we reacted very strongly on that, and this is maybe not so ideal. Something I like, this is maybe for discussion, and a pity, because this is not I would have liked to show something. Where is it? Because I wanted to show what is a very nice procedure for, can I just quickly, wait, where can I do this? I just want to present something else. Where can I?
What do you want to do?
I need to. It's just one more slide, if I may, because
yeah, don't worry. Yeah.
This is the very nice. But where is it? Here. So this I mean, DFG is 101 years old. In the last year, we would have celebrated our 100th anniversary if we could, but we couldn't because of the COVID pandemic. And this is an application from Einstein from 1926. So it's almost 100 years ago. And he was applying for a fellowship for one of his co-workers. It's not a student, it was Dr. Groner. And you see what he wrote. He just wrote, I need some money, I don't have any. He's working on something very interesting. I mean, if you look at the topic, so combining atomic theory and relativity, I think it didn't work out so far, even not, but he said, yeah, we can do this. And actually he submitted on 20th of October, and then he added a CV of the Dr. Groner on the 18th of November. And then on 11th of December already, he wrote back, thank you for the money, it arrived, everything's fine. So things have changed since then. And I hope that in the future it will not go on for the next 100 years in the same direction. Now, thank you very much for your attention. And I should start.
Thank you, Christine. That's a very nice overview of your program at DFG. And the person I really like that some of the slides of the grantship and your view of DFG. Thank you for that talk. And thank you for all the speakers in the first session for providing a very nice overview of the funding information in your institution, in your countries. And there's some inspiring thoughts and suggestions. So we will move on to the Q&A and discussion section. Go ahead.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for coming. As Shandong mentioned, we had a good session in the morning. It was not too many attendees because there's a lot of overlaps, but it was a good session. I personally learned a lot in the morning from the other agencies. And this afternoon, we're talking about, or whatever the time is, about the success in the grant, and hopefully the audience can learn your success stories. And we have 4 speakers. I will introduce each one of you briefly. I'm going to try to be brief, and then you guys can start. Our first speaker is Dr. Heng Huang, and he's an endowed professor in computer engineering at the University of Pittsburgh. He received his PhD in computer science from Dartmouth College. He has a strong background in machine learning, medical image computing, and bioinformatics. His research focuses on developing computational methods for analyzing multimodal biological and biomedical data, including the biomarkers data with application in the cancer studies, cell biology, and brain disorders. He has published more than 300 papers in a peer-reviewed journals, and his research has been funded by many sections of NSF, as well as the NIH and National Institute of Aging, that includes the R01 and U01 application. Thank you, Dr. Huang.
Thank you very much. Let me share the screen. Thank you for inviting me to share my experience. We know that there are so many well-established PI in MICCAI conference, so they have more experience than me in grant application. Today I just want to share some simple experience I have collected at past years to help the junior faculties and also postdocs who are also attend the MICCAI conference. I hope my previous experience can help them to smoothly conduct to become more productive in their research career. So first, I briefly introduce myself. So I currently I'm associated with the electrical and computer engineering department, and also biomedical informatics department at the University of Pittsburgh, and also University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. My own research focus on both computational side, like machine learning, AI, optimization, data mining, and also I'm addressing many emerging clinical and biomedical applications in medical imaging computing, bioinformatics, health informatics, related to neuroscience, precision medicine. I'm grateful to NSF and NIH to follow my research, to make me to build the group and lab to conduct my research. I'm very grateful. So at my research, in my career, I have been applying many, writing many proposals to NSF and NIH. So some of them got funded. So I hope to share some story. I think they could help the young investigator or the postdoc researchers. Because I have been applying for funding from both NSF and NIH, so I may start to talk about the selecting the correct research topics for different agencies. As Wendy mentioned in her talk, for NSF, typically the National Science Foundation focuses on the fundamental research. So when we write a proposal to NSF, so typically the key component we consider should be like a new algorithm, new theory, some new idea. And also the emerging biomedical application are very important. So we need to balance both of them, like smart health care, electronic health record, brain disorder, precision health, image genomics, and there are many emerging topics like in MICCAI conference. They could be emerging applications. So we combine fundamental research and emerging application. The proposal will become very competitive during submission. Wendy introduced several programs suitable to our biomedical imaging computing researchers. So that's very helpful. I hope to mention that for NSF, they don't focus on specific disease. So that means there's no clinical trial. Wendy also mentioned that. So typically that's an early technique. So if we write some new computational algorithm to solve specific emerging application at an early stage, not go to the clinical trial. So NSF will be definitely a good option. On that side, for NIH, different institutes, so the core part will be slightly different, like some new biomedical or clinical problems, and the new solution will be more challenging, more important. And we need a new hypothesis, that's mean new idea in biomedical and clinical aspects. And more recently, we do see many like AI, data science technique involved in NIH research, especially at the past 10 years. So now gradually in our proposals, we also consider added novel technique we have been developing at the past like 2 or 3 years and get add a new component. Then there will be new technique we could add into the NIH proposal to help the biomedical problem. So we need to combine both the new method in biomedical and the computational. So that's a typical. I'm talking about the AI and data science related proposal. So if we are writing a pure clinical or disease related proposal for NIH, so then on that side we don't need the very new technique for computational side. So some reasonable good performance method should be good. For NIH proposal, it is very important to assemble an interdisciplinary team. So here I'm still talking about the AI data science related proposal because in MICCAI conference, most of the audience work on the medical imaging computing related topics. So on this side, on one side we need to have the doctors, the collaborative doctors, or maybe I know some PIs are already MDs. So then we also need to work with the computational scientists from, for example, the computer science, computer engineering, biostatistics, or applied math, many other departments. Also, we have the interdisciplinary team that will be very helpful to conduct the whole NIH project, because we need to guarantee we have the enough expertise to cover every aspect to complete the project. For NIH proposal, one key difference to NSF proposal is that we need both computational and clinical validations. For most NSF proposals, if we do the computational validation, so that's good enough. But for NIH proposal, it is important to have the clinical validations. When you show that, how about the biomedical clinical results in the real world to verify our proposed new technique, new method. When we prepare the proposal, actually at first session, several speakers talk about. So it is important to read the call for proposal, like RFA carefully. So if we read them carefully, we know what's the cost thought in the cost. So when we write a proposal, we should specifically focus on that. Otherwise, sometimes we because I often went to the NSO panel and also NIH sections, I saw indeed a small portion of proposal they don't really highly related to the cost. For new investigators on NSO side, there is a CRI that's typically for the first 2 year young investigators, like the first 2 years as their assistant professor tenure track. For career proposal, it's a large program for all the assistant professor before they get tenure. And for postdocs, you could consider the NIH program like the K99, the key series. There are multiple courses and multiple programs for different areas, and also there are DP series like DP5, DP2. So for NIH side, there are more programs to support to have the development for the postgraduate student to the young investigator. So when we write a proposal, it's very important to show our main goal at the first page. In my opinion, I always write in the first paragraph. So when the reviewer reads the first paragraph, typically we can let them know what we will do in the project. At the first page, typically I think we should consider why the research goal is significant. Because for example, in NIH proposal, the first section is research strategy is the significance. So we need to tell why the research goal is significant. Then, so what's the main defects of the current related research? So we need to tell the reviewer, so why we need to do this project. And then we need to talk about, summarize what's the main technique we will use. So like, because like the second section in NIH proposal, the innovation, we need to tell them why our techniques are innovative. So, and then we need to show our preliminary result for both NSL and NIH proposal. At the first page and or second page, we need to show the preliminary results to see, to tell reviewers we have the capability to conduct these projects. So for the whole proposal, based on my previous experience, it's better to have some attractive story to organize the proposal structure. So the whole proposal could consider like to describe one story, one very attractive story, new story. And for the proposal, typically we have 3 tasks. Sometimes for large proposal, like center grant, usually we could have like five tasks. For small project, for one team project, usually we have 3 or 4 tasks. Each task typically solve a sub problem of the story. So the one story very large. Then each story, when we address the whole aim, we need to design different tasks. In our side, we have the specific aims. Usually we have like 3 specific aims. Solve the same big problem through 3 different aspects. Combine them together, we can completely solve the problem. So that will be a complete story. And at the beginning of each task or each specific aims, typically it's better to point out the problem in existing research and then talk about the rationale of the proposed method. That's my typical way to organize the proposed structure. Some other appearance that it's better to add some figures to illustrate our ideas or results, because for figures it's easy to help a reviewer to understand what we will do and what will be the result we already get, why they are better than the existing one, or why our new method can solve the problem. So the figures can help the reviewer easily understand our proposal. So of course, some research probably may have more figures, but some probably may have less figures. So in my previous experience, so the in both writing or reviewing proposal, I think the figures are pretty useful to help our proposals. For NSF proposal, there is one different because NSF focus on both activity on research and education. So if we write an NSF proposal, it is necessary to have one educational section. We need to talk about the education and outreach, because in my peers panels, I see that some good, excellent proposal were not final funded because they lack the educational component. They miss the educational component. So for regular NSF proposal, we could write like up, for example, about 1 page educational and outreach component. And for young investigator, when you write like CRI or career proposal, typically you need to write much more information. I saw proposal with 3 or 4 page educational component. Meanwhile, for NSF proposal, they require some specific format. For example, we need to write the broad impact, intellectual merit, to highlight what is the intellectual key points and what's the big impact we will make from the project. So that's a specific individual section we need to write in the proposal. So besides this appearance, I also some appearance I can think at least this slide. So so the track record is important for the PI and also for the collaborative team. So we need first we should have collect a good number of publications, especially related to the proposal project. Because of the reviewer will look at your NS about sketch or NIH about sketch. So for NS about sketch, you can list 10 publication or software or toolkit. So because sometimes you may not publish, but you provide a database or toolkit. Many users use that. That will be very helpful for both NSF and NIH proposal. For NSF about sketch, you only have 10 slots. First, for young investigator, it's better to fill in these 10 slots. So that means you need to have some good publication related to the project. For NIH, we can list we write in different ways. So we focus on different scientific contribution and then write the publications. I think NIH capacity is more comprehensive. And the third director already talked about. So in my experience, it's very important to talk to program director or program officer. So they are very nice to answer questions, and also their answers are more accurate and helpful than other resources. And I know some faculty like to talk to their colleagues. Yes, that's helpful. But I think it's very important to directly talk to program director and officer. So they definitely can provide very helpful suggestion, comments for your prepared proposal, especially for young investigators. That's very important. I get a lot of help when I was assistant professor. And in NIH proposal, actually that's also applicable to an NSF proposal. So usually when every starting sentence we may try, for young investigator, you may try summarize the content for the whole paragraph to give a good, like a small caption to tell the review. So what are the content in the paragraph? That's a highlight. And also for the important information, the key information, please try to highlight them, like bold them or underline them. So the reviewer can quickly understand your proposal without spending dramatic time. So I think that's very, very helpful for both NSF and NIH proposal. And the last two bullet mainly for NIH proposal. Because NIH proposal, there's one category score, because totally we have 5 category scores. One category score is about the research environment. So research environment is all important. I know for some new investigator postdoc, they may stay in the small university. Then if you could improve this category by collaborating with other researchers, because you can combine the research environment to if one university doesn't provide enough environment, then you could combine with other university environment to utilize that. So to enhance the proposal. Meanwhile, I think before NIH proposal, we need to write the scientific premiums and also the rigor of prior research. So it is important to write a clear statement to tell reviewer. So what is the scientific premium of your proposal? What are the rigors of prior research? So please make them clear in the proposal. That will be very helpful, very useful for reviewer to quickly fully understand your proposal. Otherwise, sometimes could cause misunderstanding. Then that's then the proposal may not be correctly evaluated. So I do see some proposal before they didn't write clearly on these two categories. So I think that's very important for young investigators to pay attention. When you write a proposal, please make sure to write down the clear statement for that. Okay, I think that's that's all clearance I can think about. So I pass to the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Dr. Huang. It was great. Actually, it was very even educational for me. Thank you. The next speaker is Dr. Andreas Maier. Is a professor and chair of the computer science and head of the pattern recognition lab at the University of Erlangen-Nuremberg. I hope I didn't butcher that. He received his PhD in computer science. Then he has worked as a postdoctoral fellow at the Stanford University and innovation project manager in Siemens Healthcare. He has received many research grants, including the ERC Synergy Grant that is entitled 14 Nanoscope. His current research interests focus on medical imaging, image and audio processing, digital humanity, and interpretable machine learning. Welcome, Andreas.
So Dr. Maier is not able to join the meeting lively because he has an unexpected appointment a few days ago, he told us, but he pre-recorded a video for us. So I'm going to just show the video to you guys. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see the video?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna play that.
Welcome everybody to this short video presentation. I'm very glad that you actually invited me to give this presentation, and I'm very sorry that I can't be here in person, but I'm trying to make this video as vivid as possible. So I would like to present something today about my experiences in Germany regarding funding in Germany and also in the European Union. So this will be a bit of a personal kind of tasted presentation because, you know, it's basically about the experiences that I had with my funding topics so far. So my name is Andreas Maier. I'm with the Friedrich Alexander University Erlangen-Nuremberg, and yeah, let's go ahead and have a look at a couple of slides. So I want to share my experiences here that I had in the funding in the European Union as well as in Germany. So I would like to start with a couple of observations. And before I do that, I would like to show the kind of group that I'm working with. So my group has approximately 50 PhD students, and we are only one professor, a couple of postdocs, and then also a lecturer. So it's a rather big group in a computer science department, and we have several work groups that then essentially research in many fields of medical image processing, from reconstruction, image segmentation, big data algorithms, and so on. So quite a bit of research that is done in my lab. So funding is kind of important in order to maintain the size of such a lab. Well, let's have a look at what I want to talk about today. So I want to give a first overview on the general funding topics, that the different funding programs that we have available in Germany. So I think that's a very interesting kind of information. Also, if you're considering moving to the EU, or if you're considering maybe a position in Germany, you may want to know what kind of funding opportunities are available to you. Then I particularly want to highlight the things that I want to recommend for early career researchers, because there you often have the pressure that you have to bring in grants, then you have to get it the right grants actually. And if you choose the grant programs wisely, then it can also help you in boosting your career. So there's a couple of grant programs that I will highlight that are very, very useful. I will not list everything that is important for early career researchers, but I will highlight the topics that I found most important in my personal career. Next, I want to have a couple of hints on grant writing. So grants are also a little bit of storytelling. You have to have the right topic. You have to also describe the idea very well. And you have to, of course, make it appealing for your reviewers such that they will actually then later grant your application and write a positive review. And then I want to shortly summarize what I said in this short presentation. Well, let's start with the access to funding in Germany. And obviously in Germany, you have access, of course, to international funding programs. These are funding programs there you can actually get funds worldwide. They're typically very competitive, but of course it makes sense to actually have a look at those programs. There is like the Gates Foundation. They have specific calls and specific research interests that they want to support. And if you happen to do research in exactly one of the areas that they're interested in, then it's good to have a look at that. There's also the Paul Allen Foundation. One thing that I found super supportive and really great also for early career researchers are the NVIDIA hardware grants. So there you can apply with a small research idea and get a good graphics board in order to support your research. And I really recommend everybody to have a look at these programs. By now we have been given numerous graphics boards to our institute by NVIDIA, and I think it's really a great program. So keep that in mind. It's not so difficult to get. And I think it's also a very good thing maybe to start off with the first grant. You can already write that together with your supervisor during your PhD studies. Obviously, there's European funding available in Germany, and the big programs are, of course, ERC, and the other big one is now Horizon Europe. So the ERC program is very competitive. The funding chances are maybe 10%. They have that in different flavors. So there's the starting grants, the consolidator grants, and the advanced grants. And there is a fourth funding program that is called the Synergy Grant. And in the Synergy Grant, a group of really good researchers can write a grant proposal together and get up to 10 million euro of funding. The consolidator, starting grant, advanced grants, they're in the ballpark of 2 to 3 million of funding. So these are really competitive programs, but they're also very prestigious. So if you manage to get one of those, it will really help you boost your career. I was part, or I am still part of an ERC Synergy grant, and I can tell you, once I won this grant proposal, it really changed my career and opened a lot of opportunities. So I can recommend that to anybody. Try to get into the ERC grants if you're in the European Union. They are really a big boost for your career. Obviously, there's also Horizon Europe. Horizon Europe has dedicated calls, so you have to keep your eyes open which calls are opening soon. And if you have the right research that is compatible with the call, then you can also get very big research programs, and they can have funding 2 to 3 million for several European partners. Make sure that you really have your partners spread across the European Union, that they're from the north, the west, the east, the south, and that can really help you getting those programs. So go visit international conferences like this one in order to build your network such that you have the right partners to participate in such calls. In Germany, of course, there's different grant funding programs available, and there is, of course, the German Research Council, the DFG. Within Germany, it's very prestigious to get one of those, and they have also different kinds of levels where you can actually apply for. It starts with the individual project, then you can have groups, or you can really have large collaborative clusters where then also multiple universities can be involved. So these are really big projects, can run up to 12 years, I believe, 10 to 12 years, now and then change the regulation. So this is really very interesting to get into one of those programs. Of course, there's also direct government funding. This is then run by different ministries. So, of course, the Ministry of Education and Research is a big player. They like to bring together industry and research institutions such that they collaborate and new products can emerge out of that, so that it eventually will also generate some revenue and then, raise more taxpayer money. More taxes are paid if there's more revenue, such that more research can then be conducted. And then there's, of course, also other institutions, so direct ministry funding. So the Ministry of Economy sometimes can give out funds. There is also the Ministry of Health that sometimes directly support projects, but also foundations like Helmholtz, Fraunhofer, Leibniz, the German Cancer Foundation. They all have dedicated grant programs, and if you do the right type of research and you have the right partners, then you can also receive funding from them. But the programs vary quite a bit, and I won't go into all of these details, but there's plenty of opportunities, so keep your eyes open. The money is really on the street. You just have to write the right grants and pick it up. If you want to travel, you want to go abroad, or you want to bring somebody in from abroad, then DAAD is the institution for you. So this is the German Academic Exchange Service, and they fund travel. And this whole Corona pandemic will hopefully end soon, so we will be able to travel more. And then DAAD is the location to go to. Yeah, and then if you're lucky, there's also local funding in Bavaria, where Erlangen is located. There is also access to quite a few funding programs that are only for Bavarian universities, which is really a good thing. So they also put out a lot of money, and if you have some grant proposal, then you can also send it there. Obviously, if you work at the right institutions, there might also be funding available from that institution. So like early career grants, support for writing bigger grants, or also small kickoff projects, such that you can do the first research, get it started, and then go for one of the big grants. So keep this open. Typically, there are mailing lists available where you can register, where you get all of this information. So really talk to your colleagues in your institute and try to figure this out. If you're new at some place, ask around. There are typically these information sources, and try to get access to them. Now, of course, I have some recommendations for early career researchers. And what I really want to recommend to you, if you're in Germany, but also in other European countries, is, of course, the ERC funding. ERC funding is really competitive. It's really hard to get, but if you get it, it's a very, very good grant funding program. And what's very interesting about ERC grants is you can move it, so they're personal. So if you move to a new institution, they have to move the grant with you. So of course, if you're in an interview and you're asked, what kind of research do you want to do, and you already have like 2 million of grant funding from the ERC, and you can bring it to the institution, then of course your application will be considered as very appealing. And also I want to recommend the DFG funding, which is the national funding, but of course in all European countries, there's similar grant programs. And the European countries have agreements, bilateral agreements, so also with the UK. And the keyword here is money follows researcher. So also in these national funding agencies, you can acquire personalized funds. And in particular, the individual projects are very well suited for that. So also these programs will switch to a new employer. So if you don't have a tenured position yet, then these grant programs are very interesting for you, because you can bring them to a new employer, and that helps you in order to create a new position. And obviously your previous employer will also consider like once or twice if you take like 2-3 million euro of grant funding with you, because they also benefit from the overhead money. So this is really something that can help you get into the negotiation with a new position or get a better position as your current institution. So go for those grants. I already said that there's the individual projects, group projects, and then also collaborative research clusters. And also in those, you will get the funding and you will be able to perform really good research. Make sure whenever you apply for a new position, which grants you can actually transfer and which you can't. And obviously also talk with the people that you have on your payroll. So you don't want to move to a new institution and have not talked with the people that are dependent on your funding. So in these cases, you may have to do 1 or 2 negotiations. And obviously, if you're able to find a good compromise, then you will also be able to actually then continue your research. So for example, in the German universities, there's typically the right that even if you leave the institution, that everybody who started their PhD with you will be able to complete the PhD according to the guidelines of the university that you're leaving. So I found that really helpful, because sometimes, you know, you move abroad and then the PhD students have to do additional courses and things like that. That would make things really complicated. And check that out also when you're moving institutions. That may be really relevant for your career plans as well as the career plans of your dependents. I already talked about money follows researcher. Really keep that phrase in mind, Google for it, make sure which grants can actually be moved. And there's also consulting by the funding agencies. Typically, you can just call them and ask whether the move you want to make is possible or not. So I generally recommend to search the funding mechanism. Of course, take the competitive ones, but also take the ones that you can move to a new institution, because it gives you a lot of power when you're negotiating with employers. Well, what other advice do I have? A couple of hints on grant writing. So obviously, when you write a grant, the science goes first. So choose the topic that you want to solve, the unsolved problem, the unmet clinical need in our society. Really focus on the problem that needs to be solved. And then everything else has to come as a chain of argument out of that problem. Of course, it's difficult to do that right from scratch. So have a look at other successful grants. Which grants have already been granted? And ask colleagues and ask them if you can have a look at their proposals. They may not need them anymore because they already received the money, so they probably would also share this information with you. And I think you can learn a lot by looking at successful grants. Then, of course, you start with the problem, and then you describe why it is important to solve. So obviously, if you want to write a competitive grant, you need a hard problem to solve, where you would get a lot of benefit if you solve the problem. I don't know if you are solving cancer, or if you're solving a certain disease, or if you're solving a problem that has been not found a solution for centuries or for many years. This is a compelling grant story. So if you just say, okay, I want to improve this and this technique by 2 or 3%, that's not a good grant story. So you want to have a game changer, a compelling problem to solve. And then you also need to make sure that you review the state of the art appropriately, and you point out what's missing. Now, you want to make sure, okay, this and this and this has been done, but they never tried this. And this is why I want this grant proposal, because this is really not present in the state of the art. There is a lack of this research, so please fund that. And then you also want to argue why you are the right person to do that, because you did this, and because of these reasons, you are probably the best person in the world to fill this gap in the state of the art. Then when you write the proposal and you fill this entire line of argument, then of course in the work program, you also want to be specific. So you don't want to list a couple of buzzwords, or we do deep learning and we do UNIT and we do a couple of reinforcement learning approaches. This won't get you the grant. You want to go into detail. You want to say, okay, we do this, and then we apply this and this method. And it has to be plausible that with this approach, you're actually solving the problem at hand. And of course, if you want to perform this line of argument, then you have to have evidence. So you have to have preliminary experiments, you have to have prior research that gives good evidence that what you're proposing is likely to work. So essentially what you're constructing here is a long argument. And to be honest, a good grant reads a bit like a crime story. Yeah? So you identify the problem, you identify the scene, you see there are all these clues around, and then you put the puzzle together and show how you actually solve the problem. So this is a good grant proposal. And essentially the story you want to convey is, if you are not funding, if you're not suggesting this proposal for being funded as a reviewer, it's a crime against humanity. This is how a grant proposal should be for a reviewer. And of course, the reviewer also wants to read it. It wants the information to be concise but accurate enough. And you don't want to elaborate into too many directions. So you want to be really clear and focused on this grant proposal. So this way, I was able to secure a couple of projects. I don't want to bore you with the different projects that I acquired because they are already funded. So you have to come up with your own ideas. And I know you guys are super smart. You have plenty of great ideas. So you will be able to secure many grants. And I think you will do a really good job about that. So this already brings me to my summary. Check out the funding programs available to you, and then also evaluate them, how valuable they are for you. If you're in the early stage researcher, then maybe funding programs that are transferable make more sense for you than others. So keep that in the back of your mind when you're applying, because it will also put you in a better position to negotiate. So you want to write compelling grants, you have to have a good story. And if you have a good storytelling in your grant, it's also that you get your grants more likely funded. So you want to convince your reviewers and of course yourself that your grant proposal is actually feasible and you provide all the evidence that you will actually be able to implement it. So I think these were essentially the tips that I would like to give you for writing grants, and in particular with a focus here in Germany. I think the general writing recommendations will also apply in other countries. In some countries it's a little bit different, so there you have to have a plan A, plan B, plan C, and you have to somehow also be able to mitigate risks. But in the grants that I've been writing here in Germany, it was also about supplying the required evidence that what you're proposing is actually feasible. And then you get a good grant program, you get a good work program, and then it's also much easier to implement the grant actually, because the people working in the grant will already have a very good path that they need to follow in order to implement the project. So I hope the things that I've shown to you here were useful. In case you want to have additional information, so I can't answer questions right now because I'm unfortunately not available, but you can contact me on social media. I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also actually have a YouTube channel, and you can also contact me by email. So thank you very much for watching this. And yeah, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask me, approach me. Thank you very much.
Outstanding talk. It was pretty good. I really enjoyed it, and hopefully next time I can get him in person, and so I can bombard him with the questions. Thanks to Andreas, and we go to the next speaker, Dr. Anant Madabhushi. Anant is the director of the Center for Computational Imaging and Personalized Diagnostic, and the Dunon Institute professor in the Department of Biomedical Engineering at Case Western Reserve University. He received his PhD from the University of Pennsylvania. He is a pioneer in the field of computer-aided diagnostics, pattern recognition, and development of image analysis tool for diagnostic and prognosis of diseases. He published over 220 journal paper and 190 peer-reviewed conference paper, and has over 100 patents awarded or pending. Anant has 7 active grants that have all variety. He has a R01, U01, and including U54. It looks like these are mostly NIH grant because I'm familiar with them. Welcome, Anant.
Thank you very much, Behrouz. Thank you, Shandong. Thank you for the organizers for this very important workshop discussion around NIH funding. So I wanted to share a few of my nuggets. I just have really enjoyed the other talks from this session. I think there'll be a lot of overlap between what I have to say and what the other speakers have said. But I would like to share some of the lessons that I've learned along the way through what I call my NIH funding journey. And so these are some of my perspectives. I certainly cannot suggest that these are going to be universally applicable, but hopefully there are some nuggets in there that you might find useful. Just to get it out of the way, this is my conflict of interest disclosure slide. I consult for a number of companies. I also sit on advisory boards, and I partner with a number of companies. I guess if I'm being completely honest, my true conflict or my true disclosure is the fact that I also have a social media account, and if there's any of what you hear in this presentation that seems remotely appealing, that's my Twitter handle, so feel free to give me a follow. Right, just very briefly about myself before I go into talking about my NIH funding journey. So probably a lot of you are familiar with radiomics, the ability to computationally extract features from imaging data. So a large part of our research activities in my group are really focused on radiomic-based characterization of disease from medical images, but also from what is called pathomics, computational pathology. And really our fundamental interest has been in how can we use features and patterns extracted both from radiologic as well as pathologic images to essentially develop tools, not just for disease diagnosis, but also for prognosis and predicting therapeutic response. There's been a lot of interest around artificial intelligence for identifying the presence of disease from CT scans, MRI scans, or pathology images. But the focus in our group has been to not just focus on the diagnosis, but also in predicting disease severity, predicting disease progression, predicting therapeutic response, and really focused around developing these novel tools for tailoring therapy for a given patient based on their specific risk profiles. So I just want to give you a little bit of context about the kind of research that my group is involved in. Just a little bit about my background. I got my PhD at the University of Pennsylvania in 2004, became an assistant professor of biomedical engineering at Rutgers University in 2005, went on to get tenure and promotion in 2011. In 2012, I moved to Case Western Reserve University as an associate professor, and then moving on to becoming a full professor at Case Western Reserve University in 2014. Since 2014, our group has grown significantly. Today, the Center for Computational Imaging and Personalized Diagnostics that I have the pleasure and honor of directing has grown into one of the largest groups on campus and in fact nationally. We're about 60 to 70 people working in multiple different areas of radiomics, pathomics, and AI applied to imaging for precision medicine applications. So I want to sort of go back a little bit, and for some of the early career investigators here, I want to sort of share some of the insights from a more personal perspective. And I want to think back to how my funding journey began and some of the inflection points, if you will, along the way. And one particular inflection point I recall was back in 2006. I was an assistant professor. I was maybe a year and a half out in my academic career, and I was at the IEEE ISB meeting, and I met a faculty member, I will not name this individual, who works in medical image computing, very successful. And I recall asking this individual how he was doing, and his response was, "I'm great. I have 3 R01s, I'm doing really great." And that really stuck with me, right? Because this individual had ascribed doing well to essentially having multiple R01s. And to me, that was sort of a bit of a wake-up moment for me, because it made me think about what is it that I want to really accomplish. You know, why do I want to write a grant? Why am I in academia? Why do I want to do research? And I really spent some time deeply thinking about that. And what I realized, and have since then, is that really the focus for me, the reason why I do research, the reason I write grants, is about impact. I want to have impact. I want my research to have impact. And I think this has been a lesson that certainly I would like to think has helped me along the way, focusing on impact that you want to have and not the reward. Because I think the more you think about the positive impact that your work can have, that your research proposal is going to talk about, the more likely it is going to be funded, because reviewers will see the opportunity for transformational change and positive change and impact that your work can have, and you're going to be likely to be funded. But I think starting with the sort of aspirations of the reward itself, perhaps is not the best place to begin. And so I have very deliberately and purposefully in every proposal I write, and I think you've heard this from the other reviewers as well. And of course, I'm giving here a more NIH-centric perspective as opposed to NSF or other agencies, where we know that with NIH, typically you've got these 4 different sections that you architect your proposal around: significance and impact, innovation, research strategy, and team. And the differential sized fonts that I show here is very deliberate, because it tells you about where I spend most of my time thinking about the problem statement. I think about significance, I think about impact. Then for me, the team is really important. The innovation is important, but perhaps not as important as the significance and impact. And to some extent, the research and strategy, I think, comes right at the end. And the reason I put this at the end and with the lowest font size is not because you can ignore the research strategy, not because it's not important, but I think in many ways, if you really have thought about your significance impact, you have your team, and then you think about your innovation, the research strategy in some sense has sort of baked in. At that point, you probably know what your research strategy is going to be. And so this is sort of how I tend to prioritize grant writing, how I tend to think about what are the aspects of the grant proposal that I want to really focus on. So, 2006, move along to 2021. This is a snapshot of my NIH Reporter page for you. And you know, going back to what I said on the previous slide about focusing on reward, focusing on impact, I'm sorry, not focusing on reward, focusing on impact, focusing on significance will ultimately result in the rewards that you want. And so, you know, this is just a snapshot that I took from NIH Reporter this morning. You know, we've got 12 different funded projects, you know, on the NIH Reporter page. So if I apply the same metrics based off what my colleague from 2006 said to me, which is that he had 3 R01s and he was feeling really great. Well, I guess by that token, then I'm feeling really, really, really great right now. So, but again, the point is not to indulge in chest thumping. The point is not to provide a summary list of all your laurels, of all the various grants that you have. That's not the point. The point is impact. Thinking about how can you really have transformative impact. I want to just also share with some of the junior investigators who might be on this call about sort of my chronology of NIH funding. Right? So my very first grant was an NIH NCI R21 grant that I got in 2006. That was followed by an R03 grant I got in 2007. My first R01 grant, which is what most of my commentary over the next few slides will focus on, was in 2009. I was very lucky. This is the time when President Obama's American Recovery and Reinvestment Act was instituted, and my proposal, which was in the 24th percentile, was picked out for funding. And so I really caught a lucky break. My next R01, interestingly, came the very next year. And so I was in a fortunate situation where I had a couple of R01s early in my career. Through 2011, 2014, I got another few R21s. 2015, I received a U24 grant, which was a multi-institutional, multi-site grant that really banded together a number of different collaborative sites. And then over the course of the last 5 years, we've had a large number of R01s, U01s, and U54 grants. But as I put all these laurels out, I think it's also important to acknowledge that, no matter how successful you are, no matter how many grants you have, every one of us is probably going to be going to face rejections at some point. I think this is something that perhaps we senior investigators don't talk enough about, and I think it's important to share our rejections. This is a tweet I put out last year, nearly a year ago, about when one of my R01s was not discussed, and I wanted to put this out there because it's really important to understand that even if you are senior, if you've got multiple grants, multiple projects, you can still not be discussed. This is, I'd like to think this is one of the strongest proposals I put out. It was not discussed, but you just have to have thick skin. You just have to persevere. You just have to pick yourself up and say, okay, no, that was okay. Let me go back in. Let me look at the summary statement. Let me try to figure out what was wrong, go and fix the issue and go back in. So it happens to everyone. It's not just you, the junior investigators. It happens to senior investigators as well. As I like to call it, yes, you look at my NIH Reporter page and you see all of these different grants. What you don't see are all the slashes and the whiplashes on my back, right? All the rejections that I've had, you don't see those. But it's just important to share, I think, with the early investigators. I want to just spend a few slides here to talk about how in general, I go about preparing and planning for grants. I typically tend, and I'm talking here again very specifically about an R01 grant, I typically tend to plan an R01 grant about 4 or 5 months out in advance. Now, sometimes this is a little more tricky because sometimes there are special RFAs that might come out where you've got a 2-month advance notice. And so you have to improvise. But in general, if it's what is called an unsolicited R01 grant, where I'm going in under a typical regular cycle, that is a June 5 or an October 5 or a Feb 5, I typically will plan at least 4 to 5 months out in advance. One of the questions that I think about first is, who do I want to collaborate with? Do I have an existing collaboration, or is this an area that I'm going into that requires a new partnership or a new collaboration? So that's something to deeply think about. One of the other things that I found to be extremely successful, and a mantra that's really worked for me, is MPI grants. every grant that I have had funded, every grant across the board, well, certainly every grant that I currently have funded is under the MPI mechanism, a multi-PI mechanism. And so with the NIH, you can do this where you can have more than one principal investigator on your grant. And what I've found is, given the nature of the work that I do, which is artificial intelligence applied to precision medicine, invariably I have a physician, an MD, who is one of my partners on this grant. And that equation seems to have worked really well, because we've been extremely successful in getting these MPI grants funded, because I think to the reviewers, it shows that there is inherently and naturally a complementarity of the expertise. Now, having said that, you want to be careful, because reviewers are also savvy. They will also see a partnership that is contrived. They will also see through those grants where you've done all the writing and the clinical PI has not really contributed. So what you want to do is to make it a true partnership. But if you're able and you're lucky enough to establish these kinds of sort of technology clinical partnerships, you can have really, really compelling grants. One of the other things that I've also been quite successful with are academic industry partnerships. The NCI has had AIP grants, or AIP mechanism, the Academic Industry Partnership R01. We've been very fortunate. I've had 5 of these so far over my career. But it takes work. It takes work because you have to develop the partnerships, the relationships with your companies. You have to figure out who you want to work with, really create sort of a launch pad, really create a track record of working together. In general, my rule of thumb has been that if I'm entering a new disease area, if I'm going into a new area that I've not previously worked in, time to R01 funding is about 2 to 3 years. So you just want to keep that in mind. If you're going into a new disease state, let's say bladder cancer, you want to apply AI to bladder cancer. In general, no matter how successful you've been, it typically takes about 2 to 3 years in terms of doing the research, generating the data, writing the publications and the abstracts, getting a team together, and really providing some street credibility that the reviewers will find compelling. So that sort of timeline is typically 2 to 3 years. Things to consider when developing your proposal. I like to use NIH Reporter that I just showed you a snapshot of to look at previously funded proposals. It's a really good website. It's been improved now. You can go in and do a keyword search. You can see for these particular keywords, who's been funded, what has been funded. You can use the NIH study section selector to identify the best study section for your proposal. This is something that a lot of people don't do. The NIH has worked hard to develop these resources for investigators, and yet not enough of us take advantage of this. Talk to your SROs. I mean, just remembering back, Dr. Shabestari and I had several conversations, previously when he was, on the BMIT study section. I would reach out to him. He was always very kind. He always made the time to talk to me about proposals. Tailor your biosketch for each proposal. Focus on the introduction statement. What is your proposal going to be? Talk about. You have an opportunity to talk about why your proposal is important. It's sort of the piece that the reviewers are going to read, and it gives you a little bit of discretionary space there, where you can talk about why you're so suited for this proposal, why this proposal is so important. The big thing, and I think this has been referenced by the other reviewers, is the storytelling, is clarity. Really focus on clarity. The big problem, I've been a reviewer for NIH, I've been a standing study section reviewer for the last dozen years or so. And one of the big problems that I see with, particularly with a lot of early stage proposals, is they try to cram too much material in. You want to have, I think the previous speaker talked about it as a crime story. I think that's a fabulous example. You want to be telling a story. You want to talk about what is the problem you're solving? What is the unmet need? How big a problem is it? Are there solutions or not? If there aren't, what unique solution are you proposing? How can you address this problem where nobody else has been able to address the problem? One of the other things I just want to mention is innovation, because this is a portion of the proposal that consistently trips up PIs and reviewers. There's always these conflicts, in the study section about innovation. Nobody seems to understand it, And NIH is very, very clearly focused. I mean, if you go in and there's a very clear definition of innovation that the NIH has, which is really being able to address a problem with a solution in a unique way to solve a problem. It's not about necessarily creating a brand new algorithm from scratch. And that's really important to understand. Can you do something quicker? Can you do something cheaper? Now, this is innovation. That's the way NIH really thinks about innovation. How can you have impact, right? It's not just about an algorithm. Grant writing, just generally, I know I'm running out of time, so I'll try to be quick here. So grant writing, I typically tend to go through about 12 to 15 iterations of my proposal before it gets submitted. The first thing I work on is specific aims. I try to write that way in advance. One of the things I think about is criteria for success. This is what, for me, I look for when I'm reviewing proposals. I try to make sure, I think this is one of the first things I think about. What does that mean? Very often you've got an AI algorithm and you want to talk about how great your AI algorithm, you've got a 93% AUC, 94% AUC. Well, one of the things that reviewers want to know is that good enough, right? It may be sometimes that your AUC is well over what the market currently has, the tools that are currently there. Maybe it's way better. Or sometimes it may be the 93 or 94% is not enough. You need to make more of an effort to define that. You need to be able to educate the reviewers as to what criteria of success you're going to aim. What are your current results? How do you think you're going to be able to improve that? And why the results that you are aiming to get, why are those results good enough? What is your criteria of success? That needs to be clearly defined. I also like to write proposals in little bits. I don't like to sit and spend a whole day on writing proposals. I like to work in 30-minute blocks. I like to do focused writing because really you're telling a story, right? And so it's almost like, you want to have inspiration. You want to think about nuggets rather than trying to sort of sit and crank out the whole proposal. Compelling figures, data, don't overwhelm the reviewer, connect data to aims. Don't try to, give, you've written 40, you have 40, 50 papers in your bio sketch. Don't try to put all the data there. You can be minimalist. Try to make sure the data connects to the aims. Try to really focus on that connection. Don't try to, bury the reviewer with all the various different papers you've written. I mean, the reviewers will see through that. I also am not a big fan of a lot of equations in proposals. A lot of reviewers, a lot of PIs put a lot of equations. A new regularization term in your equation is not going to excite reviewers, right? You want to look at it, you want to try to find that balance between enough detail and sort of providing the big picture, but you don't want to get too caught in the weeds. You definitely want to get it out to the experienced investigators, ask them for feedback, give them a lot of time. Don't send it to them a week in advance. Reach out to people who you trust, who, call in the favors, right? If you've got your previous mentors, call in the favors, but give them time, right? Don't send it to them last minute, and I do this on a routine basis, just some of the people in my group, Dr. Tiwari and Dr. Vishwanath, who, previously were in my group, and some of the other research faculty in my group who've all been the recipients of federal funding, NIH, NCI, and DOD. And with all of them, I've spent a lot of time working with them. They've done a lot of work. One of the key things to the success has been starting to think about your proposals early, getting a specific aims, sharing it with more experienced investigators like myself, get feedback, go back to the drawing board, start from scratch. You need to give yourself time to be shot down and then do it again. Finally, I just want to talk about grant resubmission. More A1 proposals than A0 proposals get funded. What you want to focus on is not getting an A0 proposal funded. It is likely not going to happen. What you want to do is get discussed. And to do that, you want to send in a strong proposal. You want to make sure you're sending a really strong proposal and try to get that, in your 20th, 25th percentile, right? Now, that's not in your control, but what you can do is to make sure that if you have any doubts about the strength of your proposal, don't send it in. You've got two shots. You've got an A0 and an A1. Make sure when you send that in, it is as strong as possible. If you're not discussed, blow off steam, have a drink, swear, do whatever you need to do, right? Take some time, get away from it, then come back when you're sober, when you've cooled down, look at the summary statement, understand the reviewer comments. Reach out to the PO, program officer, to discuss. On resubmissions, the introduction is the most important statement. That is what you need to look at, right? Chances are, if you're going to standing study section, high likelihood, SROs, are trying to help you get your proposal funded. They are going to try their level best to get the proposal back to reviewers who previously looked at it. They're going to try their best. And so what you want to do is to make sure that you really have a compelling introduction. So on resubmissions, this is the most important piece. And what has worked for me is I found that when I land in a top 20, 25th percentile on the A0 with a strong introduction, you can get in the top 10 percentile, and that really should be the goal. And so I just want to end with a few other topics about personal discipline, right? And now people very often ask me, do you sleep at all? I sleep every night. I sleep about 7.5 hours every night. I work out 4 to 5 times a week. I run about 20 to 25 kilometers a week. I eat healthy, and I try to take time off, get away from work, try to keep some dedicated time on the weekends, steer clear from work, phone, email. These are really good habits that you want to try to develop a culture for, because you almost think of this as a marathon, right? You're thinking of this as a marathon. And towards that end, you want to be healthy, you want to be fit, and that also takes some personal discipline, right? And I can tell you that, since I've been, running and active over the last, 6 to 7 years, my success has also gone up. Now we can talk about causation, correlation, and all of that, but clearly I think taking care of yourself and personal discipline, I think, is really going to be important. And again, thank you very much. Happy to take questions, but also, like I said, I have a social media account, so feel free to give me a follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Anant. This was great. I do, when it was in-person meeting, I used to teach how to write a successful grant, and you touch every point that I usually use. Thank you. Something I should mention, that when you get the A0 is not scored well, do not call program director and yell at him, because he has nothing to do with this. But thank you very much. I will ask some question later. Thanks. Our last speaker is Dr. Bettina Baessler. Bettina is a consultant radiologist with a special focus on quantitative and cardiovascular imaging at the University of Zurich and the Department of Diagnostic and Interventional Radiology of the University Hospital of Zurich. Her special interest lies in the translation of quantitative imaging techniques to clinical routine and in the application of machine learning in medical imaging science. Currently, she's working on various projects aiming to apply the radiomics and deep learning and machine learning to cardiac and oncological imaging, with a special focus on the standardization of a quantitative cardiac MRI. Welcome, Dr. Baessler.
Yeah, thanks very much for the kind introduction, for the invitation today. So really great talks, and there will be much overlap between all these talks. So I come from Germany, and I'm currently moving from Switzerland back to Germany, actually. So I've been appointed full professor in Würzburg, and will start out on Friday, so quite soon. And yeah, so my research is focusing also on radiomics and cardiovascular imaging, especially, but also oncology and many topics which are very interesting to me, actually. So I'm a clinician, so my perspective might be a bit different in some points, because I'd like to highlight some points for early career researchers, which might be also in the clinical environment, and there are some specialties around this. But in general, it will be quite broadly applicable across all disciplines and funding agencies, I hope so, but my experience, of course, lays mainly in the German and Swiss environment, so European funding. So to begin with some general advice, funding is at least becoming, but maybe it already is, the most important currency for us researchers. So it is getting more and more important. It hasn't been quite for a while, at least in Germany. That's why I wanted to highlight this point. It is more important than publications. It is more important than good teaching, even if teaching also gets more and more important in Germany. So if you're negotiating professorship or a new position, you will be asked how much funding did you get so far, and the higher the number, the better for your negotiation. So therefore, start out as early as possible. So even if you're really new to research and starting out, try to get a grant funded. And nobody's perfect. This is really important to keep in mind, especially at the beginning. So there is a quite huge learning curve. And it's great to learn through experience and also criticism and rejection and through mentoring. So you have senior PIs who can mentor you and you should learn from them. So try to start out early with small grants, not the large ones. So don't try an ERC grant if you're aiming for your first grant, or maybe NIH, I don't know. I'm not so familiar with the US funding. There is some kind of law. Those who have funding get more funding, but not because they have so much money, but because they are writing so much grants. The previous speakers also pointed into this direction. But you should carefully select the funder, especially as an early career researcher. At the beginning, maybe some institutional programs from universities or own departments might be easier to get because there are not so many people applying for it, and not so many different countries and research groups, etc. And there are many programs dedicated to early career researchers, also in Germany and Europe, which are great to just start out and learn. And what I would also recommend is to collaborate with experienced PIs, because they can be your mentors, but they also can teach you through the entire grant writing process. And also a small recommendation not to be too ambitious, as I said, not to apply for an ERC starting grant for the first time. And this also applies to the sum of the grant. So don't apply for a €2 million or US dollar grant if you, well, have published one paper or so. Have only the heart to do it. So don't fear rejection. Rejection is normal, and nobody is safe, even Nobel Prize winners. So as we just heard, everybody gets rejected, and this is part of research. And as I said, successful grant writers simply write more grants, and this is why they get more funding. And you shouldn't get discouraged, because science can be frustrating, not only when you're grant writing, also when you're doing research. This is part of research too, and we all have to learn this. Take critique constructively and use it to learn and to get better. And it's not so nice to have a grant rejected, but if you get some feedback, if you don't, then ask for feedback, call the agency and ask for feedback, and then use it to write a better grant. And it's only learning by doing. As I said, get help. So try to get a successfully funded grant from one of your colleagues. Would be good if it's around the field you're applying for. Contact the funder, they're always nice, as we heard a lot of time today. Go to workshops, have mentors, whatever you can get, take it to learn. So these were some general points, and now I have 2 stages with some tips and tricks and do's and don'ts. And let's begin before the actual grant writing process begins. And one really important advice is really carefully read the call text and the instructions, and read them over and over and over until you memorize them, at least if they're not 100 pages long. When in doubt, call the funding agency, because it's really important to adhere to these guidelines. And then one mistake I made a couple of times log into the submission system, if there is one, and most agencies today have a dedicated submission system, and have a look at it. What do they want from you? The information they want to put them in sometimes are in the guidelines very concisely. So when I put off my first grant, I didn't log into the submission system before the deadline, and then the deadline came and I logged in and I saw, oh, they want additional stuff from me, and then I really had trouble. So this is a really important recommendation. Then adhere to the instructions, because it's really annoying if your grant is rejected due to formal issues. Nobody wants to have been rejected due to formal stuff. So really carefully read and adhere to the instructions. Then, as we also heard in the last talk, have a clear focus, a really clear research question, and clearly communicate it. And I have a tool I use for a couple of times now, and which I highly recommend. This is the message box. Maybe some of you have heard of it. It really helps to focus thinking on the main issue, and it can look like this in the end, so that you really have clear statements on what is the issue, which are the problems I want to address, so what, why should the reviewer or the funding agency care about your problems, which is really important to convey this information, which solutions do I propose, and what is the benefit for the population or the funding agency, whoever you're talking to. I really like this kind of structure your thinking, and it really takes time to get so concise in your message, but it's worth the time. Then do an in-depth literature research, and don't write in your grant, first I will do a literature research, then you will be rejected if you write this. So do the in-depth literature research before you concept your proposal. And I highly recommend directly working with a citation manager. Then you have already everything in, and you save time when you're writing also your publications. And what I use and what I can highly recommend is to use a brainstorming tool to get some ideas out and to really focus this stuff into the message box. It needs some time, but in the end, it gets from, well, really some chaotic to a quite clear structure. And I try really to come up with the main messages. So where is the gap in knowledge? Where is my central research question? What is my central project aim? And yeah, what are maybe smaller research questions which also should be addressed in my grant, and which hypotheses I have. So I try to condense this before I even start writing a grant. Then we also heard this plan with enough time. So I heard from full-time researchers that they take around 1 week per page of a written grant in full time, of course. So we're clinicians, we don't have time. So usually, well, clinicians do it in the evening hours or so, or on the weekend. I try to convey this message to all the directors of the clinics that this doesn't work so well. So an outstanding proposal cannot be written along the way or during 1 hour free time in the evening, which is usually, well, at least tried and doesn't work so well. So plan enough time for revisions, review by your co-PIs and colleagues, mentors, whoever, for the upload process. And also plan with some buffer time if you have a submission deadline, because what usually happens at 12 p.m. on the submission day is that the technical system crashes. So you shouldn't be trying to upload anything. Try to do it in advance, at least 1 day is my experience. That works quite well. my recommendation is to draft the working program first, before you even write a sentence. So clarify the feasibility of what you want to do. Then draft at least draft. You don't have to write it, but at least have an outline and be really clear about what you want to do. And then the work packages ideally can be derived from the research question you have in mind, at least already. And then write the proposal. And at least in Germany and in Switzerland, the proposal, the work program should be around 50% of the entire proposal. So it's the main thing of the proposal. And that's why you should write it first, because it's much easier to focus the introduction and the red line and your story around this work program. It should be as detailed as possible and necessary, and the aim should be feasible. So you have to show that you are the right person to do what you're proposing, and that is feasible, and the risk is well, not too high for the funding agency. So you have to convince the reviewers, actually. The central aim has to be on the first page, and yes, that's possible. We saw it, and this is one example from my proposals. This is the central aim. I try to also format it that it really stands out and everybody can capture it, even if someone's only scanning your grant and not really reading it, that he stumbles across your central research question. So a complete introduction to a DFG proposal, for example, which has around 20 pages, should be no more than 3 to 5 pages. Then don't forget the abstract. This is really important. Also, I had the experience that I didn't think of the abstract, and then you had trouble, you had to submit this, and then well, we stumbled together something in a few minutes. So, but you have to bear in mind that this is one of the most important things of your entire grant. So I try to write the abstract immediately after the work program so that I am really clear about what I want to do in the first page. So I have everything I need for the abstract and plan enough time to write that, because it's the only part of the proposal most people will actually read. So the funding agencies use your abstract to select the reviewers. They don't read your entire proposal. So the abstract should be really clear and really show a mini version of your proposal. And it has to include all relevant aspects. So this takes some time to really condense it into a few words. And yeah, then you should put yourself into the shoes of the reviewer. Sounds simple, is not so simple. So imagine the reviewers sometimes have to read a dozen of proposals or even more. And there are sometimes topics outside of their main area of interest. And they have also to do their own research along the way, as we all do. And this is voluntary engagement, usually. So write your grant with having in mind a really tired, hungry reviewer who still has to go through 50 proposals. This is the right mindset to write a proposal. And we should all aim to make it as easy as possible for the reviewer to understand your grant and your proposal and your ideas. So use formatting, use figures, avoid spelling and grammar errors, because it's annoying to read this, and try to use simple sentences. This is especially challenging for me. I like Thomas Mann and write really long sentences. Adhere to the guidelines, simple stuff like that, but this all will help the reviewer in being led through your proposal. And last but not least, be patient. It takes time. It takes time after you submit it. Then you hit the submit button and then you don't hear anything for 6 months or so. So yeah, science and patience go together. And with this, I'd like to conclude, good luck in your grant writing. And I'm happy to answer any questions also by email or Twitter, whatever. Thank you.
Thank you. That really was amazing. Thank you all. To all of you. It is this is the area that I work a lot on it, and I have to answer all these questions every day for the PIs that they call me before the review, after the review. They don't know what the grant is. I really enjoyed all the talk. Just would you go, Shandong? Would you go to the discussion? So I don't want my talk to be recorded anymore. So.
Yeah, so let me just stop the recording. 1 second.